week. You got that? Thursday, December 14th. Year in review, 7:30 in the evening at Cornish Playhouse at Seattle Center. You can go find out ticket information at kuow.org/events. Or if you can't get tickets, if we sell the thing out, then just make sure and join us again next Friday for the year in review. Okay, let's get at what happened this week. And this is this just in this morning. The city of Seattle said it has canceled the idea of building a playground at Denny Blaine Beach, a public park. Denny Blaine is not officially a nude beach, but for decades it's been a gathering spot, especially for LGBTQ people. And it's one of a handful of places where people, including Sophie Amity Debs, feel safe picnicking and swimming and sunbathing in the nude.
I think it's really important for a lot of us. I know, especially because it's a mostly trans friend group, and a lot of us have felt a lot of shame and discomfort around our bodies, as you know, pretty much everyone does. But also, especially, is I think leveraged against trans people in this society. A lot of people who feel really uncomfortable with their bodies are able to have a really freeing experience coming here and being celebrated and just hanging out and taking in the sun and enjoying a really lovely day without any shame.
The city proposed putting a children's playground at Denny Blaine, partly because an anonymous donor offered to pay for it, but only if it is at that park.
It feels as though the private donor behind this is possibly intentionally putting these two groups in conflict in order to drive people off the beach.
Drive people off the beach. The suspicion is that this donor wanted nude beachgoers to feel so uncomfortable around kids and around the public reaction to them being near kids that they would just stop coming to the beach. So this week, a crowd of people came to a public hearing to stop that playground.
All it takes is one parent who doesn't like the idea of their kids or themselves seeing naked people for there to be problems.
The city said the reason to build the playground there was not just the private donor part. The city's mission is to create more play spaces and shoreline access for young people, and there are no playgrounds within a 15-minute walk of that park. And you didn't buy that argument, Joni.
Oh, no, I'm so happy that the park department is deciding what I consider the right way. Why does Seattle do this all the time? We're always trying to fix a problem that doesn't even exist. This beach at Denny Blaine, I live in South Seattle, and I know these various beaches pretty well.
You go to Denny Blaine in the nude?
No, I have not done that, and I knew you'd ask that, but I'll just get to my argument here. Look, for 30 or 40 years, this evolved as a natural use of this particular stretch of beach. There are a lot of beaches along there. Many of them are playgrounds. I'm all in for the kids, all in for the playgrounds. But, one thing that just drives me crazy is how often, some do-gooder, in this case, an anonymous do-gooder, comes along and says, we can fix it. We can do it better. It's not broken. Hello.
What do you mean by do-gooder? Are you assuming that there's a lot of suspicion here because
kids, money, playground,
free playground, they're paying for it.
I sort of got to that way.
Okay,
but I mean, also the fact that this person is anonymous, and I know there's a lot of donations. I get it that are people don't want to say their name and stuff, but in this case, this is the most un-Seattle thing you could do, to say, here, I'm going to give you this big gift. I'm going to change the use there dramatically from what it's been for 30 or 40 years, but I'm going to give you this big gift.
The donor's not necessarily changing the use, right?
By adding a playground?
There's not a rule. Yeah. The Seattle, go ahead. I'll let other people speak.
Well, this is kind of the big problem, right? It's why open government advocates and journalists and other people advocate for transparency in government, because it's really easy to be cynical about something like this when we don't know who's putting up the money. We don't know why they're putting up the money, but they're tying it to this specific park in this specific area. And it would make a big change to a community. And you strip the identities of either party away. If you're making a big change to a community, you're going to have people in that community going, well, why do you want to change it? And who is changing it? Again, it's a problem with it being so opaque.
Yeah. Amanda?
Yeah, I thought the writing on the wall for this proposed playground was sort of I kind of got the sense it wasn't going to pass after all the public testimony. And then especially when the Seattle Parks Foundation, which was asked to be the fiscal sponsor for this project, pulled their support and they said this doesn't align with our values, having heard from the community. I think the question I sort of have now is like, to what degree did Seattle Parks anticipate this happening? Like, did they think this community wasn't very organized, or did they think this would be just sort of, it would just roll along? Because, it's been a huge community response for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was pretty swift opposition.
Yes.
Which was kind of surprising. I didn't see much support in favor of the park.
But I would like to be clear myself and to walk listeners through this. It's not illegal for there to be nudity at a public park with a playground, right? The Seattle Times reported that that there are parents who bring their kids to this nude beach. So it would be this kind of off the books. Like if some outraged parent calls the cops, they're not going to get any response from the cops, right? It wouldn't be illegal.
Well, so I guess this is one of those parts of the law that I just was not aware of until this week, and I was reading all the coverage. But apparently it's not illegal to be nude in Washington, but it is illegal to, like expose yourself in like a way that's unexpected or,
and if children are nearby,
exactly.
that's where you get into trouble.
But if children are nearby, is that in the law? Because
yes, I think so.
It is. It is illegal
I think
to
it's
be
14
nude
and
with
below.
children?
14 and below.
Yeah.
And if it seemed to be, shall we say, presenting yourself in a way that is,
if it causes affront and alarm, it becomes a misdemeanor, right? And that's where a lot of advocates for the park were saying this effectively would shut us down, right? Because on paper they could coexist peacefully, but it would take one parent to say this nude beach is causing affront and alarm for these
which
children.
could happen now, because if parents bring their kids now, it's a public park. It's just that we know this is a safe space, a happy place for people who don't feel comfortable other places, and so no one's expressing alarm and calling the cops.
So here's a thought that I had about it, a little different. I mean, if this is just a cool, generous gift, why can't it go to some of the other areas of the city that actually need better playgrounds? There are many locations that need improved playgrounds. If it's just like, I want to help the kids and I want to have more play space, for people living throughout that area.
Well, the city says this saves them the money. This is a free park and they can spend that money on a playground someplace else.
Yeah, but this park doesn't currently have this kind of a playground. And so who says it needs it? Why not in an area that's already craving more equipment?
Well, the city said there's not a playground within a 15-minute walk. There are other beaches and parks where it could go. And in fact, it sounds like the sightlines are good for a nudist beach, because they're sort of, you can't see the beach from the upper area, but that also
there's other beach access. It just doesn't have playground equipment on it. There's plenty of other beach access as you go.
Yeah.
Well, Councilmember Mosqueda brought this up in a statement. The things that make a nude beach make it a kind of a terrible playground. Like you brought up the sightlines.
Yes.
It's very near water. If you've ever watched kids or if you had kids,
you can't guard the beach.
Yeah, and they move very fast, so you won't be able to see them. And she also brought up there's other sites that would work. Lakeview Park is 850 feet away, she says, from Denny Blaine. Veretta Park, I think it's how you pronounce it. It's 500 feet away from Denny Blaine. So these are areas that are wider, bigger, where the park could go.
Yeah, one of the things brought up by the community members this week is that, while there isn't a park within 5 or 10 minutes, this area was sort of low priority for Seattle Parks to begin with, to put on a playground, because there are playgrounds that exist, maybe like a mile away, not like a quarter mile away. But yeah, so and of course the wealth argument has sort of been brought up here, which is like, well, here's like a pretty wealthy neighborhood and they want a playground here and only here, but nowhere else, and it's a low priority site for the city.
Right. Yeah. Well, so is the city's policy that the city doesn't add an amenity to a public park without the permission of private citizens who've used it that way for a long time? Because that's the argument that rich people make when they treat public lakefront access as if it's their own private park and say, oh, it's been this way for decades.
Well, they changed that many years ago. They came in and said people who were, I forget the word, but who were basically adopting the adjacent space for themselves for their own use, like a basketball hoop on public land, or spreading out a beachfront property. So it does take the narrow or bigger piece of beachfront that's public. They filled in there. They put a lot of pocket parks in these places. You can see them if you go down the lake there.
Yeah, I'm just saying I didn't realize it was illegal to be nude around minors or people under 14 or whatever it is. But if that's true, then the nude use of the beach is taking away the use of a city fund, a public park for some people.
But yes, we have various populations of people who need access to the lake in the summer. In case you haven't heard, it's getting a little warmer in the summer.
Yes.
That's what makes it so cynical, right? Is we're not saying this is illegal, but we're going to put in this thing that conflicts with what people are already doing there.
Right.
And now if you do it, there's a high likelihood that you're going to be harassed by law enforcement or punished for doing this thing. And that's how these safe spaces go away. You move something in and it just discourages people from doing what they were doing there.
Right. And one of the things that the community members brought up this week is that it's not even about the law, it's about the perception.
Yeah.
It's sort of playing into this, conservative narrative about LGBT people, which is, they're out there to like sexualize and groom your children, and sort of putting a playground right where there's like a traditional use of a nude park would sort of, a lot of these activists felt like it would sort of play into those narratives.
Because there's this narrative that nude equals sex in the first place. Like, it seems kind of like it oughtn't to be that big a deal in the first place. I'm pro nudity. I'm happy that people who love the beach get to keep using the beach.
I think this is our like Seattle sensibilities.
This really is. This really is. But I just think that certain things that happen in the city, not everything needs to be, reviewed, changed. Yeah, some things can just be what they are, and this evolved this way, and it helps a community enjoy the summer. Let it go, and they did. So
yeah, and they did. Okay, anything to add? Did we cover it? Okay. So another thing, you're listening to KOW's Week in Review. We've got Joni Balter, Alex Halverson, Amanda Zhou here, and Amanda, amid record-breaking rainfall, you went to a flooded town where flooding is a way of life.
Yes. So for anyone who does not live in literally any part of Western Washington and Oregon, there was an atmospheric river this week, which pretty much meant we got dumped on with rain. And that resulted in flooding in a bunch of our rivers here. And on Wednesday, I believe, Wednesday, I went to this town, which is essentially, everyone there describes it as a town that was built on an island within a floodplain. And, everyone who's lived there for decades says flooding happens every single year. So it's not that, remarkable to them that this year the river sort of reached a record high.
Mm-hmm. How did you get there, by boat?
Oh, no. So
this is Savannah in Snohomish County.
That's correct. So on Tuesday night, I think this tiny town of like less than 100 people like kind of hit the media because like the whole town was flooded. Like you could not get there without a boat. But by the time we got there, the waters had receded and, people were cleaning silt off their driveways. Yeah.
I thought this was a beautifully written story, and it really took me there just the way you described everything. This is a town that I think where everybody needs a power washer. Is that right? Because
not surprised, yeah.
When this happens, it's just the muck and you got to get it clean. This is very common for certain communities, Preston, Fall City. There's certain areas every late November, early December.
Yeah.
Many, not every, but yeah. We used to call the Pineapple Express. Now we go atmospheric river.
Why do we need a term for a lot of rain? I mean, are we saying this is something different from the rain that's always heavy rain
to make it more dramatic,
Well,
right?
well, it's like a specific weather pattern that they're describing. It's not just like little precipitation here and there. It's like a stream of like warm, moist air that comes from the ocean over Western Washington.
Okay, but that's not just a climate change thing, right? There have been atmospheric rivers forever.
They happen, and there is research out there that implies that there will be heavier rain in the latter half of the century, but it is a weather pattern,
right?
So, NBC News, when they did their Seattle, the whole Northwest is flooding story, they sent their reporter, at least had one photo of Snoqualmie Falls.
Oh, yeah.
And so I ended up getting calls from around the country like,
is that
can
your
you swim? How can you be? And it was like just so overblown, but
Yeah, that's my street.
yeah,
Crazy, right?
yeah, that's my backyard. How did you know?
Well, one thing I'd always wonder, you said this was a record year for the flooding. Every time we get these sort of record weather events, is the record an anomaly, or can we expect, do you know, more record years?
Yeah, that's actually something I don't know. And I didn't look at sort of like in the last 10 years, like what the river records have been like. But it is something that scientists say is going to get worse as time goes on, you know, maybe not next year or the year after, but like in 50, 70 years from now. The lack of snowpack and just heavier rain events in the fall is going to result in pretty much more intense flooding.
And you said it's a way of life, and it is for a lot of these communities, especially in Snohomish Valley. There's a lot of communities that flood. Was there any sense of this is especially bad this year, or did they kind of take it in stride like they do every year? Is there any worry that they would have to leave the community, or they'd not think about that at all?
I wouldn't say it got to that extreme. Like they were pretty much taking it in stride, but also admitting, like, you know, this one was pretty high. Like, you know, this was a good one.
Well, they had expected less height of the river, like 16 or 17 feet, and then ended up with 21. But then by the time you got there, it was receding.
Right.
Now we're supposed to have another, I don't know if it's a half a blast of the same stuff tomorrow and Sunday. So are you going to go back and check on it?
I don't know. I'll probably keep an eye on the hydrograph that, you know, NWS publishes online. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what's going to look like the next week.
Well, so is there eventually, if Savannah is already flooding as a way of life and they're used to it, and it's going to get worse, is there eventually not going to be a Savannah, Washington?
I really don't know. You know, one of the people I talked to, they built their like store and home like 10 years ago, and they very intentionally like set it several feet above the ground because they were anticipating flooding. Okay. So I don't know. I guess that might also speak to general like population trends, that more people are living in cities than, you know, these small towns.
Can we use as much water as we want to get?
I think you have to tell Bill if he can take that back that he's been talking about
Like
in the notes among us.
Yeah.
Can you? The water is close to normal, isn't it, right now?
It kind of seems that way, but you know, Seattle Public Utilities, which provides water for pretty much like all the towns and most of the towns in King County, I think. They still have their voluntary water restriction going, which has been the case, I think, for the last like 2 or 3 months. You know, I think they are thinking about I mean, they evaluate it every week, and you know, I think it could be possible they might rescind it. But it does look like the 2 reservoirs that we sort of depend on are back to normal levels.
But a snowpack is better than torrential, you know, than the rain for the region and for water use.
Right. And that was
that's
sort of
shrinking.
And that sort of came up in October when we got like the first bout of rain. Like people were like, oh, can I take a bath?
Yes.
Like, can I stop, you know, can I use water as I used to? And the utility pretty much said, like, yes, it did rain, but it wasn't enough. And also, like, we're looking at projections like 3 or 4 months in the future, not just like today or tomorrow.
Right. Okay. Well, Crystal is open now, fully open. Crystal Mountain Ski Resort. I-90 is back open over Snoqualmie Pass. Chains are required. And apparently this is a problem. The transportation department says most of the drivers who spun out were not chaining up, or didn't have traction tires.
Did you see the tweet from the Washington State Patrol trooper?
No.
Someone's chains weren't small enough, so they used a USB cord to alleviate that.
And the whole car lit up.
Yeah. They said you can't do that.
Is there a fine for not chaining up and then causing either an act, even just closing the freeway or having to be hauled out of the ditch or anything? Is there
really?
I believe
penalty?
if you don't use chains when you're supposed to use chains, there's a fine.
There's a
So if you cause it, you'll get the.
But you think about it, a lot of people have cars that they think this car can do it. This car is going to be able to do it. I don't need the chains. And so they just keep chugging up there until they run into everybody else that had the same thought.
Yeah. Okay. Forecast rain at time, rain this weekend, but then a dry week after that. So
yeah,
dry-ish.
Yeah, that's about all we can ever say. Dry-ish. Okay, we're talking with Amanda Zhou here from Seattle Times. We've got political analyst Joni Balter. We've got Puget Sound Business Journal's tech reporter Alex Halverson, and we'll talk about a business story, Alex, here in just a moment. We're going to take a short break on Week in Review. I'm Bill Radke, and I sure hope you'll stay tuned.
Support for KUOW comes from the Seattle Symphony, presenting Handel's Messiah, returning to Benaroya Hall December 15th through 17th. The orchestra, Seattle Symphony Chorale, and soloists will perform the arias and the Hallelujah Chorus. Tickets at seattlesymphony.org.
Hello, my name is Vaughn Jones, a producer for Seattle Now. Every Casual Friday on Seattle Now with Patricia Murphy, we break down the week. From the biggest stories to the oddities that make Seattle, Seattle, and all in 15 minutes or less. Listen to Seattle Now wherever you get your podcasts.
Support for KUOW comes from Recompose, a full-service funeral home transforming human bodies into soil through composting, offering Pre-Compose, a way for people at all life stages to plan ahead for their funeral. Learn about plan options and how it works at recompose.life/NPR.
This is KUOW's Week in Review. I'm Bill Radke with Joni Balter, Amanda Zhou. Alex Halverson is here on the business beat, and Alex, Seattle's Alaska Air Group is buying Hawaiian Air, almost a $2 billion deal, if regulators approve it. Is this going to go through? And then we'll get into why we should care.
I don't like to make predictions about mergers going through. I mean, who knows? Yeah, Microsoft Activision went through. Kroger, Albertsons, a big one's kind of in the air. There's also one with JetBlue and Spirit Airlines that's facing a lot of scrutiny right now. So who knows? But if it does, it'll be $1.9 billion, and they'll use about $900 million of that to wipe the debt from Hawaiian Airlines. And then they'll be able to fly to Hawaii.
And yeah, this JetBlue, I was going to ask you about that, because the Spirit Airlines JetBlue, it seems like the Biden administration is frowning on that. I'm wondering, is that for any reason that they might frown on an Alaska-Hawaiian merger?
You know, I actually don't know. I think it would just make JetBlue a lot bigger. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the differences there is that JetBlue, in trying to buy Spirit is a legitimate low-cost airline. If you're comparing Alaska Airlines and Hawaiian Airlines, they charge similar amounts. And so there is a legitimate government interest, public interest, in saying we should have low-budget airlines. We should not let them be scooped up, eaten up by a bigger company.
Yeah, there's an argument of stifled competition between JetBlue and Spirit. You know, they serve a lot of the same routes. The interesting thing about Alaska and Hawaiian is there's not a lot of overlap in their routes. Our national chain did an analysis of different routes, and they found that there wasn't a lot of overlap. So you can be a bigger company in this country. You can be a monopoly. You just can't do things that stifle competition. So as long as regulators don't think they're doing that, it'll probably go through.
Does that also mean ticket prices are not going to go up? When I hear merger, I think layoffs and higher prices in general.
There's always the chance, but again, since there wasn't that underlying competition, there might not be a real reason to. Now, maybe Alaska buys Hawaiian and they just jack up the prices, and then they don't have any other competition. There's always a chance of that, but it could not happen as well.
In general, mergers are not good for consumers. I mean, at the beginning, I don't want to bring up the worst one. Oh, yes, I will. Bartels and Rite Aid, how'd that go for everybody? So this merger, to me, you know, like, ask yourself if your flying experience is getting any better. Did your seat get better? Bigger? Did it get any bigger?
I don't remember that.
It's really hard to fit in these seats. And, you know, they're just cramming more people in. I mean, you know, KUOW has a lot of listeners that are probably holding some miles on Alaska. And if you add the additional mileage consumers of Hawaiian, is that going to get you mileage flights easier, lower cost, or even upgrades anymore when you add that many more people to the pool who are going to be vying for those kind of benefits?
Is that how it works? The more customers there are, the harder it is to get miles?
But I don't know how they do it, but it's a limited number of people who are going to get those.
There's also the question whether Hawaiian would survive without this merger. You know, like I said, they had $900 million in debt. They have a fleet that's aging really rapidly. We reported that their Their 717s are about 50% through their usable life. So they'll have to eventually replace a lot of their fleet. They don't have a lot of the money to do that. And they have a decreasing customer base every year. Part of that's because of the pandemic. A lot of airlines did as well. But it's hard to continue when you're that far in debt and you don't see any additional way to make revenue.
And they're not all Boeing like Alaska is, right?
No, they've got a mix of Boeing, some older Airbuses, and a lot of their fleet is planes and jets that have been discontinued.
Well, Alaska just replaced Starbucks with a Portland coffee brand. Are we going to get some Kona coffee now on Alaska?
It's just highly overrated, if you don't mind my
Is it?
saying. I think so.
I mean, one thing you could see for customers is fewer layovers, fewer multiple stop trips going from the mainland to Hawaii. Once Alaska has Hawaiian, they'll be able to do a lot more one stop or no stop trips. So the optimistic case for the consumer is easier flights to Hawaii if they're not cheaper.
Yeah. So for some Seattleites who can afford it,
There you go.
this might be okay. Are they going to? But they are going to keep Hawaiian Airlines, right? It's that they're still going to have the flower and the.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll act as some subsidiary.
Yeah.
Front facing, nothing will change, but you'll see Hawaiian maybe buy Alaska or something like that.
Right.
And they'll keep their headquarters in Hawaii,
Oh, okay.
which Alaska has its headquarters in SeaTac.
Are they going to change it to Hawaii Airlines to be consistent with
Oh, good
Alaska?
question.
Is it Alaska Hawaii or Alaskan Hawaiian? How can they merge these two corporate cultures if they disagree on something so fundamental?
And where does Horizon fit into there? You know, they have to overhaul the whole
Oh, my.
brand.
There'll be so many names on the plane.
The mind reels. Okay, so if this goes through, they're talking about the deal closing in 2025, right? Okay, so we'll follow it. And by we, I mean Alex Halverson from Puget Business Journal, who comes by and tells us about stuff like this. Oh, hey, the off-duty Alaska pilot who tried to shut down the engines on the flight from Everett to San Francisco is out of jail, out on bail. He told, just for those who don't know, he told police he had been dealing with depression and a lack of sleep, and that he had taken psychedelic mushrooms 2 days before this incident, and he was facing 83 attempted murder charges, one for each person on that plane. His attorneys argued he didn't want to hurt anybody. He was freaking out, and any of those charges are now downgraded to reckless endangerment, and he is court ordered to get help with his mental health and stay away from drugs and stay away from airplanes.
Not a good ad for psychedelic mushrooms, and not a good ad for letting some of these folks come kind of ride the flight out in the cockpit, right?
Yeah, riding in the jump seat.
Mm.
Well, it's pretty rare.
It is pretty rare.
darn rare.
It's pretty rare.
Okay, so you're listening to KUOW's Week in Review. Did I mention it's been a while since I mentioned the Year in Review. Just want to let you know that's coming up next week, Thursday evening at the Cornish Playhouse in Seattle. You can find out all about that. It's a really fun stage event and special guests and all that kind of stuff. Go to KUOW.org/events. And in any case, just tune in for Year in Review at this time next week. Okay, let's talk about shoot an owl, save an owl. The federal government is considering letting people hunt non-native barred owls in order to save their competitor, the Pacific Northwest native northern spotted owl. The northern spotted owl is a threatened species. They are losing the battle with the barred. Seattle Times' Linda Mapes describes barred owls as relentless predators who eat anything that moves. Quote, they will yank worms from the ground and salamanders out from under rocks, nail birds on the wing and anything in the water, from fish to snails to crayfish and frogs. Even slugs are on the menu, and they're just bigger and more aggressive than northern spotted owls. Having lived here a long time, when I say northern spotted owl, it takes me right back to the 90s. And I know, Alex, your folks lived in Forks, right? In Timberland.
Both my parents are from Forks, and I believe both of them lived there at that time in 1991 when basically the whole town shut down, so they could all travel to Olympia and protest the habitat protections. Basically, how I heard it is the state expanded the habitat protections for the northern spotted owl into second growth forests, and a lot of the residents said, hey, those spotted owls live in primarily old growth forests, which are already protected. And it really put a squeeze on the timber industry, which was already kind of struggling at the time. So a lot of folks were mad.
Amanda, I think you and I were talking. You were saying you were very interested in this story, this idea of a legal hunt, owl hunt.
Yeah, well, I mean, just imagine someone shooting an owl with a gun.
Yeah.
Like I remember Linda is one of my colleagues, and she was telling me about this story idea, and she's like, oh, well, they're proposing like killing this one owl to save the other. And I said, oh, how do you kill a barred owl? And she looked me like dead in the eyes and said, with a gun. I mean, I just feel like the idea is so crazy. Like just imagining someone shooting an owl like in the middle of the night. Like the way you attract them is like, I think you pretty much like camp in these woods and you like play the sound of like a barred owl to attract like a barred owl towards you. And then, I don't know how they spot these things in the dark, but then
they're nocturnal.
Yeah.
This is all happening in the dark.
Yeah. And then you shoot it. But I mean, I think it's really been like a heartbreaker for a lot of like bird lovers, because like no one really loves the idea of killing an animal. And then I think a lot of the focus of the story was talking about how really it's, the human impact here that have made the survival of these creatures so hard. And now we're meddling again to shoot an owl.
Yeah. Will you remind us how humans have held back the northern spotted owl?
I am not totally clear on it.
Helped the barred owl,
but essentially, I think we've helped the barred owl by growing timberland across the country that allowed it to travel here. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it was just able to get here easier. I'm not totally sure.
I think settlers did. First of all, they stopped. There's an indigenous practice of just letting things burn, and
right, so they would go.
Yeah, and so the settlers would come and plant a bunch of trees for their own purposes in the towns or whatever they set up, and climate change part of that equation. And so we've made new habitat for the barred owl. It's an East Coast species, but it's been able to skip along and come down through Canada as well.
I mean, it's like what Amanda said. It's like the grimmer aspects of conservation. For centuries, we were doing these things and not knowing what we were doing, and now we have to fix them. And sometimes the fix is killing some of them. Yeah, it's grim, but
just explain it to the barred owl.
I have nothing but questions about this. Like you were describing how they lure them out for their shooting. How do you know you're shooting the right owl? Maybe you're shooting the spotted owl. How do you have to play the exact right music? What if they like both music? How do you know it's going to work? And who thinks it's a great idea to have people out there shooting, if it's a controlled shoot or if it's, hey, if you see one, nail one, or how does this go? There's no indication, and I'm just asking this, that we have owl on owl violence here. In other words, that one owl is hurting another. I did not see that.
Well, the barred owl is more territorial and aggressive. I don't know exactly how that goes, an owl fight goes, but I think they're aggressive. It's not just that they're doing great on their own.
Yeah. But I mean, it's just sort of hard to visualize this. In some ways, limited ways, it reminds me when we had too many Canada geese here in Seattle many years ago. And they did all these things. They flew the geese over to Eastern Washington. They came back. They addled some of the eggs. And that worked a little bit. But in the end, they ended up, cover your ears, everybody. They had to gas them in these giant tubs. And, it was very unpopular. The Parks Department was under great pressure. And then their population declined. And I don't know if you've been to the beaches around here. They're back in big numbers.
Yeah, I think the proposal here mentioned it would be in like really targeted areas to sort of limit the barred owl's expansion into California.
Yeah,
and they really describe the situation as pretty dire for the spotted owl, which is like it's really on the brink here.
Yeah, I don't think it's a free for all like the lanternflies in New York, where they say if you want to kill one, it's more targeted.
Grab, no, not that.
There's not a bounty.
Yeah.
But so basically, is shooting barred owls a way of saying we're not going to restore northern spotted owl habitat? It's like our version of saving endangered species is to kill the predators. Like we drive a species to the brink of extinction and then kill the animals who are responding to the changes that we've made. We wipe out the salmon, shoot the sea lion.
It's quite a human response.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily going to save the spotted.
You have to realize the spotted owl, for all the rage against them, actually did change forest practices. How what trees will be felled, what trees won't be felled. There's plenty of wood among second growth land, and there's plenty of private companies felling timber. The spotted owl, for better or worse, actually enlightened us all about the actual unique situation that is created in old growth forests. They're really precious. They
Well,
need
was
to
it
be
about
protected.
saving those precious forests, or that there was going to be some disaster befall us if the northern spotted owl goes extinct?
Well, the story goes back to when, their preservation enlightened people about old growth forests and why they deserve to be protected. Remember, this owl was actually on a magazine cover. I don't know if it was National Geographic or Time or something.
Vogue, I think.
Yeah. Pardon?
It could be wrong.
Who'd you say?
Vogue? I don't know.
Oh yeah, Vogue.
I don't
I'm
remember.
sorry, I missed that. Yeah, you're right. You're right. It was the fashion part of it. Yeah.
Okay, so this is a proposal. It would allow for the killing of about 15,000 barred owls a year in parts of Washington, Oregon, and California. And yeah, I'm just sort of combing through my notes. I love anything that Linda Mapes writes, and there's just so much interesting in here. Yeah, so apparently you can, if you're a landowner, if you're a land manager, you can ask the agency permission, and we'll see what happens. So this is just a proposal at this point. I think it's not final, but we'll follow it for you on KUOW. We are breaking down the news of this week, figuring out what happened and why, and we're going to take a short break and play some owl music. I don't know what we're going to play, and then we're going to be right back with more of the show.
And more of the show will be coming your way in just a minute here on 94.9 KUOW, Seattle's NPR news station. It's 12:44.
Support for KUOW comes from Amazon. Committed to increasing affordable housing in the Puget Sound, the Amazon Housing Equity has funded more than 5,200 homes for low or moderate income families in the Puget Sound region.
I'm James Menendez, host of BBC NewsHour. Today, the Biden administration issues its strongest criticism yet of Israel's military operation in Gaza. Also, the Venezuelan government tells us why it wants to annex most of neighboring Guyana.
Those stories and a whole lot more today on BBC NewsHour, which begins at 1 o'clock right after Week in Review.
Support for KUOW comes from the immigration group at Ryan Swanson Law, counseling Northwest businesses for over 125 years, lawyers helping individuals and businesses with non-immigrant visas, permanent residence, and citizenship. More information at ryanswansonlaw.com.
This is KUOW's Week in Review, live streaming on YouTube, talking to you on radio and podcast. And we have with me Seattle Times environmental and climate reporter Amanda Zhou. We have political analyst and contributing columnist Joni Balter. We have Puget Sound Business Journal tech reporter Alex Halverson. I just want to tick through some stories that we haven't had a chance to mention so far this hour, Alex. And one of them is, I learned this from you, that Zulily is closing.
Yeah, it's
Seattle based.
As far as I know, effectively a shutdown. We got a warn notice, the Washington,
the layoff notice.
The layoff notice. Thank you. Last night that they were closing, laying off 292 employees in Seattle, and then Ohio and Nevada, where their warehouses are, got similar notifications.
Headquartered in Pioneer Square.
Yeah, newly headquartered in Pioneer Square. They were in Belltown up until about a month ago, and they sort of slowly moved. They had the big headquarters in Belltown, but it's been a really rough year for Zulily. They were sold to a private equity firm based out of Los Angeles called Regent in May. They went through 2 rounds of layoffs at least. They never disclosed how many employees were laid off. And, we actually found out that they were allegedly targeted by Amazon through a Federal Trade Commission lawsuit. The FTC alleged that once Zulily started looking at Amazon and Walmart as competitors, Amazon started allegedly price fixing things and specifically targeting Zulily to bring them down.
What is Zulily?
Zulily is a e-commerce site, and it's taken on a few iterations. It really started as this, as far as I know, this events-based retail clothing company, and it was centered around, I think, moms originally, and they would have...
It's an events-based retailer.
Yeah, so they would have these sales events, and they would come out of nowhere. They'd say, oh, we have this I don't know, Lululemon, 50% off Saturday starting at noon. And they really relied on customers wanting slow shipping for really deep discounts, basically the opposite of what Amazon was doing.
Oh, I see.
After a few years, as Amazon was getting more powerful, they said, okay, well, maybe we should try to target Amazon, make big discounts and faster shipping. And that's where it's kind of started to struggle. And over the past year, they've had a revenue decrease. They've had vendors complain and even accuse them of not paying them. And then they had 2 big lawsuits over the past 2 months, charged at them that they hadn't paid vendors to the tune of over $2 million at a time. And it looks like they kind of looked at their cards and folded. As far as we know, we haven't gotten any confirmation from them. Their media contact page is blank, so we might not hear anything from them. We don't know.
So, final question: is Zulily going bust? Is it some harbinger of an economic situation, or the financial, like the business model, or does it sound more like an operational sort of badly run company thing? Do we know?
Badly run company might be a little too harsh, but it's in that part of the Venn diagram, I think, right? I think they kind of bet on this e-commerce future, trying to get with the major players like Amazon and Walmart and Shopify, and they just didn't have the customer base to do that, is my opinion.
Okay.
And retail's constantly changing. I mean, with the model changes so frequently, you cannot be secure in this business. It just changes so quickly.
Yeah, it was probably the brick and mortar stores killing online companies.
Yeah, that's
like
it.
it happens
That's
all
it.
the time. Did you all hear about the
U Village killed Zulily?
Yes.
They probably.
I like the slow shipping idea. Like the slower it comes to me.
Well, that was early on. It was like, you will get name brands for way less. You just have to wait.
You just have to wait.
And it was the exact
If I
opposite.
give them enough time, will they pay me? Like
Possibly.
Maybe. Yeah.
Possibly because that's the fast cycle of holding on to those clothes.
That's my side hustle. Waiting a long time for packages. Okay, you heard about the Fred Hutch hack last month, right? Did you all hear about that?
Vaguely.
No.
Yeah. So somebody or some bot hacked into the computers at Seattle's Fred Hutchinson Cancer Center, and this week, hundreds of Fred Hutch patients got emails from hackers demanding money. This is a patient named Yo Hammerline who says they got one of these emails and that it was legit.
And it immediately contained information about the breach and a correct sample of some of my sensitive medical information, including my medical record number.
Hammerline says the email told him how to pay the ransom with Bitcoin on a site on the dark web. Fred Hutch says it got about 300 similar calls, and their advice is don't pay the ransom, delete the message, report it as spam, block the sender, contact the FBI, and monitor your credit reports and bank statements.
Oh.
Do companies owe their customers anything when they're, look at all the stuff they're describing that the customers now have to go through?
There's been class action lawsuits when companies suffer like a data hack and a lot of your information is leaked out. I think it's scary how sophisticated this was. Usually it's a case of, if T-Mobile got hacked a couple years ago and a bunch of information from customers was exposed. Well, what happens in that is you don't really get anything taken from you. Your number will go to this place that, is using bots to just sort of spam you and these phishing attempts by email. But rarely are they this sophisticated where they're showing you your information and ransoming it.
That is so brazen that if I had gotten that email, I would assume that I was getting scammed by somebody based on the fact that there was a hack.
Yeah, it's
right?
almost too sophisticated.
Yeah.
You're like, this is definitely a scam.
Yeah, right. Okay, let's see. What else have we not talked about? A couple of state lawmakers plan to do something about unspent gift cards. This is a good holiday story. So, if you don't use a gift card, the company gets to keep that money, and that happens a lot.
Like who among us hasn't lost? How many of you lost? Come on, let's be honest.
Definitely.
How many?
Many.
And they know that, and that's part of the plan.
Right. It's why the gift cards are a beautiful thing for them. And this proposed Washington law, apparently other states do this. Washington does not up to now, but the proposal is that after 3 years, if your gift card is not redeemed, the money goes to the state as unclaimed property. that happens in other states. Also, so you could go to the state and get your money back theoretically, right? And if you don't, then that's more money in the state coffers. Also, you'd be able to cash out the balance on your gift card if it's under $50. And there are actually several other basically ways of tilting the balance back in the customer's favor.
Makes sense to me because, this has just been an absolute bounty for places like Starbucks, Nordstrom, many companies. And, if we can benefit consumers by putting a few of those little rules in place, that would be a good idea. I think they, okay, I'm at $49. Can I please, I'm going to buy $5, $8 here. Can I please have the cash after that? Makes sense.
Yeah, but I knew what I was getting into. I'm the one who lost the gift cards. You're the business guy, Alex. I bet there's some business type. The Chamber of Commerce is listening to this, shaking their fists.
I think what blew me away is, there's always obviously a non-zero chance that companies are going to make money from this. It's money that you purchase and you didn't actually buy anything yet.
Right.
I didn't know how much they made. The Seattle Times story says that Starbucks reported in 2023 alone, they claimed $215 million in unspent gift card revenue.
Right.
That's a
I think I got like $50 of that on my desk. I'm realizing.
That's a lot of lattes, I'm telling you.
So it's if they're reporting it in these in their earnings reports, it's definitely a tactic, I would think.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, the father in me, the personal responsibility, keep track of your gift card.
But you already said you lost several.
Exactly. And I only blame myself.
Oh.
Much as I blame myself for the boot that the orthopedic boot on my foot, as we were talking about before the show. Looking at my phone, not paying attention, that's on me. Not on Starbucks. Can I bill Starbucks for my orthopedic boot?
Give it a try.
Also, another story, the Washington Secretary of State certified the election results this week. It was a record low turnout for a Washington general election. One candidate didn't even vote for himself and lost by one vote in Rainier, Washington, outside of Olympia. City council candidate Damian Green said that he thought voting for himself would seem narcissistic.
This is a story that you sit down an 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old, and you say, hey, in life, always believe in yourself. And if you ever run for anything, vote for yourself.
You'll get at least one vote.
Because the final vote was 247 to 246, and his opponent also had been planning endlessly to vote for himself, but he kept forgetting. And at the very end, his wife makes him go vote. But if our candidate here, who was concerned about being too narcissistic, had voted, it would have been a tie, and I don't know how they would have broken that close.
If a candidate had said publicly, I will not be voting for myself because I don't like to toot my own horn, would that have made you more likely to vote for that person?
Of course.
Or less likely?
Of course, you're not going to vote for somebody who doesn't think enough of themselves to mark that down. There's one thing being shy and you don't want to be too arrogant, but you at least have to say, I'm running for this for a reason because I think I might do an okay job.
I don't know. I'm not basing political decisions on that.
Okay. Fair enough. Let's see. We're getting toward the end of the show. Joni, you were telling me about a comment. This has been a international controversy over the war in the Middle East and how we talk about it and the positions that we take and the rhetoric we use. And Washington State Congress member Pramila Jayapal was part of this.
Boy, was she ever part of this. She went on CNN with Dana Bash on Sunday. And just one note to everybody, if you're going to go on the Sunday shows, you want to come off after and say, I did pretty well on that. No, she did not. She equivocated so much that it became like a national and international story, as you said. She tried, as she said, to balance sort of the outrage, but the questions that she was asked by the host, Dana Bash, had to do with, there's been so much sexual violence and assault against these kidnapped Israeli women, and some who weren't kidnapped, but many who had. And she kept saying, well, rape is really bad, but sexual violence is absolutely something that we all object to. However,
Hmm.
and she just, I mean, she was in a storm this week, and you kind of wonder who's doing PR for her, because it was negative. Now, she did, as some of the university presidents who have stepped in it, issue a statement and try to correct it. After that many days, the damage is done.
Yeah. Okay, we're at the end of the show, and now I definitely need something to smile about. Can anybody tell me something that was uplifting or hopeful or pleasing this week?
I mean, I always mention sports, but I'm going to do it again.
Okay.
The Huskies made the playoffs. I mean, come on. That was a great week.
The college football playoffs.
Yeah.
And they're in the Sugar Bowl for sure,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yep.
You have to fly Hawaiian Airlines to get to New Orleans to watch the Sugar Bowl.
Fewer flights available.
Yes, Amanda.
I was going to say what made me smile this week was all the very creative signs and t-shirts at the Save Denny Blaine meeting. This wasn't a sign or a t-shirt, but the one that made me laugh is someone during the public comments said, when we said Seattle was becoming a playground for the rich, I didn't think literally.
Yeah. Yeah. And what was the sign that you were telling me about?
Oh, am I allowed to say that over the radio?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
It said there was one of the signs said gay buns over shady funds.
Yes. Buns over shady funds. Joni, what did you
Opening of Boys in the Boat. Private screenings, I guess, this week. George Clooney in town. And then the movie opens Christmas.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. That's good stuff. I'll add to your sports note. The Mariners traded outfielder Jared Kelenic to the Atlanta Braves. And I'm happy about that, because it's been so sad watching this. He was supposed to be fantastic, and he never was. And he got so frustrated that he kicked a water cooler and broke his toe, so he wasn't even playing. It's just been awful for Jared Kelenic. And the fact that he's been traded definitely means he's going to become an all-star.
Yeah.
So I'm happy for him, right? All right.
It was hard to watch. Let's say.
Hard to watch.
All
right. Thank you for joining us on Week in Review. That's Joni Balter over there, political analyst, contributing columnist. Amanda Zhou, Seattle Times environmental climate reporter. Who knows where she'll row in next to do her next story. Puget Sound Business Journal tech reporter Alex Halverson. Thank you all. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you for listening or watching. And, the show's produced by Kevin Kniestedt and Juan Pablo Chiquiza and Tio Popescu help us out getting it up on the live stream. Bernard Ouellette makes it sound great the way he runs the board, and my appreciation and to you for listening. I just hope you'll join us for Year in Review in a week. That's going to be fun.
Support for KUOW's car donation program comes from local